Hey there, it is Rachel, and I want to share a thought with you that might surprise you, and that is I don't believe when our children have done something wrong that we should force them in that moment to say, I'm sorry. Now, a lot of people are going to be very surprised and say, what do you mean we shouldn't force them to say, I'm sorry? Then they're going to become entitled, self centered brats. Well, here's the thing. If you force a child to say, I'm sorry, and they're not actually sorry in that moment, what you're basically doing is teaching them to lie. And if they say, I'm sorry, but they don't sound like they mean it, and you say it like you mean it, what you're teaching them to do is to lie better. So we don't want to teach our children to lie. Ultimately, what we want to do is make them want to apologize of their own accord. We want them to be genuinely remorseful so that when they say, I'm sorry, they mean it. So how do we do this? How do we know when kids are more likely to say, I'm sorry? I want to ask you to think about this even from your perspective. What's going to make it more likely that you are going to say, I'm sorry, or even less likely that you are going to say, I'm sorry? What I will tell you is that people are more likely to say, I'm sorry when they feel safe. When we insist a child say, I'm sorry, when we tell them how horrible their behavior is, they don't feel safe and they're less likely to apologize for what they have done. Let me give you an example. Let's say you've done something that you know is wrong. Maybe you told your spouse you were going to pick up something for your child's project, a poster board or something like that, and you forgot. You didn't do it, and you know it was wrong. Now, let's say your spouse approaches you and says, why didn't you pick up the poster board? You didn't have that much to do. I was in a meeting. I had to leave my meeting. What is going on? You should have done that. You should have picked up the poster board. And they're attacking you and telling you why your behavior is wrong. What's going to happen is you're going to go into fight or flight. You're going to become more defensive and protective. You're not going to want to say, I'm sorry. But let's say your spouse says to you, you know what? I bet you didn't pick it up because I know you're really busy lately. I know you have a lot on your plate. You have stuff going on too. When they actually make you feel safer and feel heard and understood, you're more likely to want to apologize. You're more likely, because you're safe, to think about their perspective in that moment. So this is what we want to think about with our kids. If we want them to naturally say, I'm sorry, we need to make them feel safe. We don't need to insist that their behavior is horrible and insist that they do what we want them to do in that moment. We need to help them feel heard. So if they're mean to another child or to your spouse or to anyone, what we want to do is actually say, hey, I bet there was something going on for you. We want them to feel understood. And then they're more likely to be able to think about the other person when we say something like, how do you think that made them feel? They are more likely to want to apologize when we start in their world and ask them what something was like for them and respect what they were going through. We think that's going to make them more self-centered, but it truly isn't. It makes them feel safer. They can get out of their fight or flight response, and that's when they can think about how their behavior impacted someone else, and that's when they can genuinely say, I'm sorry. If you want to know a little bit more about this topic, I encourage you to listen to my latest podcast episode. You can find that on my website at rachel-bailey.com/236. I'll be back again soon with more tips for you. Take care.